It's been 2 months since we took possession of our 65-acre abandoned property, home to a cordwood house, an old garage, and more overgrowth than we ever knew what to do with.
When Jazmyn and Crystal first started posting videos on YouTube as the Vanwives, they became part of a growing circle of van life influencers who were trading rent, routine, and rising housing costs for a life on the move. The couple self-converted their Sprinter van, and they had no idea this simple decision to live freely would earn them millions of views. Then again, they also didn't know how quickly things would come crashing down. Vanwives quickly became one of the most recognizable channels in the van life and LGBTQ+ communities. As Jazmyn and Crystal traveled the country with their trusty dogs, covering mountains, deserts, and coastlines, their fan base kept growing. Sadly, though, things weren't as great as they looked behind the scenes, and the couple had no idea until it was too late. The beginning of Vanwives. Before Vanwives ever became a thing, Jazmyn Canning and Crystal Drinkwalter were just two ordinary girls living in Ontario and working as servers. In fact, that's exactly how the two met, while waitressing. They instantly clicked and went out for a late-night drink after their shift. That was the beginning of their inseparable connection, which was fueled by one common passion: a love for the outdoors. However, as Jazmyn and Crystal tried to build a life together, they had to face challenges that they just weren't ready for. They both felt boxed in by rising living costs, tight schedules, and a future that looked uncomfortably predictable. So, the two would often take weekend road trips in Jazmyn's cramped Honda Civic with their two Australian shepherds, Bella and Izzy, to escape from the repetitive cycle of everyday life. They weren't exactly traveling business class, and the car was small, uncomfortable, and chaotic for this party of four. But nothing mattered, because when Jazmyn and Crystal were outdoors, they lived for the moment, the fresh air, and the endless stretches of scenery. It was during one of these many road trips that they asked themselves the question that would change everything. If they were so happy on the road, why not build a life there? It sounded crazy at the time, but when Jazmyn and Crystal decided to take that leap of faith, they found everything falling into place. But most surprisingly, they found an entire community of people who felt the same way. After researching the overlanding community, which consists of travelers living self-sufficiently while exploring remote destinations, they decided to buy a van because the Civic just wouldn't do. The duo, who were obviously still on a budget, found a used 2006 Mercedes Sprinter on Kijiji for $14,000, flew to Calgary in May 2018 to pick it up, and drove it all the way back to their hometown, Barrie. At this point, the van was nothing more than a glorified tin box and had no amenities needed to survive the outdoors. Not just that, but the couple had absolutely no experience in construction. But they didn't let that stop them. Jazmyn and Crystal spent every waking hour for the next 8 months turning the vehicle into their home on wheels. In doing so, they learned everything from scratch. Whether it was the electrical wiring, plumbing, or solar panel installation, insulation, woodwork, ventilation, or flooring, Jazmyn and Crystal learned everything from scratch because they were determined to do all of this on their own. These upgrades to the van cost them around $10,000, and at this point, the duo had put most of their savings toward this project. So, everything was on the line here. They spent days following online tutorials, researching DIY van builds, and working on everything themselves, from their bed frame to Bella and Izzy's dog beds. And guess what? All that hard work definitely paid off. 8 months later, their van was completely livable with pressurized water, a full kitchen, 2 fans, a propane stovetop, solar panels, a battery to power it, a heater and inverter, wood paneling and storage, along with a solar shower for bathing. There's no denying that the space was a bit too cozy after all these additions, but the couple didn't care. It was more than enough for them to kickstart their new life together. In January 2019, Jazmyn and Crystal did the unthinkable, something that people would think over for months on end. But these two were clear on where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do in life. They quit their jobs and moved into the van full-time. The craziest part of all of this, though, was the fact that they had absolutely no plan. They were ready to go wherever the road took them, and the first stop came along the west coast of Canada, where they fell in love with Vancouver Island. That's also where reality started to hit them a little bit, and they realized that life isn't a Hallmark movie where you just quit your job and set off into the sunset to pursue your dreams. They worked a couple of months as servers in Tofino to rebuild their travel fund, then continued south through Washington, Oregon, and California. Along the way, they parked at Walmarts, trailheads, highway pull-offs, hot springs, and rest stops. They showered at rec centers or used no-trace methods outdoors. They found water using the iOverlander app and used their phone hotspot to stay connected with the world from their new reality of living in just 92 square feet. Eventually, they crossed into Mexico, then Central America. They hiked jungles in Sayulita, foraged berries and mushrooms in BC, surfed Tofino, and even snowboarded back home in Ontario to bring their journey full circle. But this was only the beginning of their journey. Despite traveling for months, they didn't start posting YouTube videos right away. It wasn't until later, after a full year of living on the road, that they began documenting their journey for others. Their first uploads were simple, raw, and deeply honest about their cramped nights, rainstorms, cooking in small spaces, long searches for water, and dogs tracking mud everywhere. But through it all, they found happiness in the great outdoors, away from a life of meaningless grind. This transparency is what drew people to their content, not to mention how out and proud they were with their queer identities. Within weeks, they grew from a few hundred followers to thousands. Within months, their channel passed 10,000 subscribers. What they didn't realize at the time was that this visibility would eventually come with a cost they could never have accounted for. By early 2020, the couple had driven through Guatemala, planning to continue toward South America. Then, the world shut down. Borders were closed, and flights were canceled. They were stopped at police checkpoints in Guatemala 8 times in 1 week, just to verify masks and documents. They had nowhere safe to park, no reliable access to water, and almost no idea how to get home. That's when they found their miracle. Then, a Guatemalan subscriber recognized their situation and invited them to stay on her family farm, offering water, supplies, and safety. It was one of the most meaningful moments in their journey, the clearest reminder of how deeply their online community cared for them. But when Guatemala announced it was closing its borders entirely, they had no choice. They contacted multiple embassies, got permission to cross 4 borders, and, in a desperate 7-day sprint, drove 5,000 kilometers back to Canada. This was the turning point that proved they could survive just about everything in their van, and that they had built a community of loyal followers who wouldn't think twice before extending help. At the same time, though, all this uncertainty made the couple want to slow down. After years of living on the go, Jazmyn and Crystal realized that the exhaustion was catching up and that they were ready for some kind of permanence. The dream that changed everything. All this constant travel had changed the couple for the better. They had booming careers as van life influencers, and people were actually invested in their lives. And that is what gave them the means to plant roots and actually build a home of their own. That is where they made one of the biggest decisions of their lives. Jazmyn and Crystal decided to buy land and build an off-grid home to stay true to their passion for remote living. To some, it might feel like an abrupt shift, but for the duo, it was the next natural step. They had always been chasing remoteness, even when traveling in the van. The two would naturally gravitate toward the edges of the map, the quiet spots where the worries of the world faded away. So why not build that sanctuary for themselves? A place that offered them silence, stillness, and nature. The influencers had traveled across Canada 3 times, but nothing felt quite as right as the land they found in the Maritimes, which is where they decided to build their forever home. The land offered a small private lake, a river flowing down the property, trout swimming toward the ocean, dense forests, canoeing and kayaking, and wildlife. It was nature in its purest form, and the couple couldn't want anything more. And it wasn't a convenient location either. It would take people hours and hours of travel deep into the woods, far away from the main roads, to find it. So all in all, it was perfect. Even better, the land had something rare: the ability to live remotely while still being only 90 minutes from stores, a balance few off-grid locations offer. Now, building the van was tough, but building an entire cabin was a completely different challenge altogether. The stakes were higher, and the budget was bigger, but the duo approached it with the same determination they had used back in 2018. They documented everything to take their audience on this world journey with them. Their community supported them, and filming the journey helped them connect to hundreds of thousands of people who rooted for them every step of the way. The cabin was a dream, but it required Jazmyn and Crystal to clear tons of trees, haul gravel, raise walls, install windows, learning off-grid electrical systems, build water and waste systems, and work through all kinds of harsh weather. Saying that the process was intense would be an understatement, but when it came together, it was gorgeous. The cabin featured cathedral-style windows, wood-paneled interiors, a wood-burning stove, and views of the lake. They had made their own personal heaven in the middle of the forest, and everyone could tell that their heart and soul had gone into it. Sure, it was tough, but their love stood the test of it all. And that is what the viewers fell in love with. The entire journey was authentic and raw, where 2 women built their entire dream from scratch. Their cabin series quickly became one of the most viewed videos on their channel, and it's not hard to understand why. Finally, it felt like the couple had settled into their lives. But things took a turn not long after. The cost of internet fame. The change wasn't sudden. It happened quietly and subtly. Fans started noticing that their videos just weren't as candid as before. Something felt off. They had stopped showing their property, which had become the focal point of their content. They wouldn't show themselves taking their long morning walks by the lake or document their adventures on the land. The videos were getting shorter, and most of them would be shot inside. It's not like they weren't posting, but the tone was noticeably different. And even their personalities felt a little more reserved, like something was weighing on them. So obviously, the viewers started to comment, worried about what was going on and why the vibe had suddenly shifted. The bombshell dropped in mid-2025 when the couple uploaded a video and shared what no one saw coming. They announced that they were selling their dream cabin, just 5 years after buying it. This wasn't clickbait or a prank. This was happening for real. And fighting tears, Jazmyn and Crystal explained that the place that was meant to be their sanctuary was no longer safe for them. Their address had been leaked online, and tons of people knew exactly where they lived now. For years, the couple had avoided showing anything that could lead to this. They would blur important landmarks and never geotag a single frame. They took every precaution possible. But it didn't matter, because someone had pieced it all together and shared it with the entire world. And the consequences were worse than they had expected. Strangers, sometimes fans, sometimes complete unknowns began showing up on their private road. Cars appeared unannounced. People lingered, hoping to spot them. Their cabin, which lived in the hearts of fans as a peaceful retreat, had become a tourist destination. And for 2 women who had built a life around privacy, this was devastating. Every knock on their door felt like a threat, and they didn't feel safe in their own home. The announcement video was impossible to watch. The couple tried to maintain their composure, but both admitted that they had been dealing with this nightmare for over a year and a half. For most people, selling a house is a financial decision, but for Jazmyn and Crystal, it was an emotional one. This was everything they had worked for. But they had no choice. They had to leave it all behind because of someone else's actions. And with that, the dream was over. The couple never publicly revealed the source of the leak, but the internet had plenty of theories. People believe that a group of over-invested parasocial fans analyzed tree species, sun directions, drone footage, and the shape of the lake in the couple's videos to piece together where they lived. And honestly, with enough dedication, all of this is disturbingly possible. Others argue that someone from a nearby town could have recognized the location and shared the news with someone, and that's how it spread like wildfire. The darkest theory suggests that this wasn't a fan. Public LGBTQ+ figures often face hostility, and some believe someone deliberately doxed their address out of malice. Jazmyn and Crystal never confirmed this, but the possibility is still very much there. What's unfortunate is that the couple's very success became their enemy. Their YouTube channel, which funded their life, is what led strangers to their doorstep, and so they made the hardest decision of their lives. The couple had also been juggling their massive Mexico project at the same time as a full architectural home built in Baja, which was stalled abruptly. But as the cabin announcement unfolded, many viewers felt there was more happening beneath the surface. Jazmyn and Crystal admitted they couldn't say everything yet, and even liked a comment suggesting legal reasons were involved. This left fans wondering whether the address leak was only part of a much larger, unspoken issue surrounding their Mexico projects. The future of Vanwives. Since leaving their off-grid cabin behind, Jazmyn and Crystal haven't slowed down at all. In fact, their new chapter looks very different from anything they've done before. Although most people still think of them as the van life girls, the couple has quietly evolved into full-time builders, sharing their secrets with their viewers. Today, the Vanwives channel revolves around construction, land development, outdoor living projects, and large-scale renovations, from homesteading to building, restoring, and renovating. The duo continues to evolve with each project. They recently also bought a massive, heavily wooded property in Canada. It has old-growth trees, fields, trails, a pond, and decades-old orchards, everything they ever wanted, plus a lot they never expected, including remnants of what appears to have been an old Russian-language survival camp. They had no idea about its history until after they purchased it. Even though the property looks wild and remote, they're actually much closer to town than before, something they say is now essential for them. They want proximity to doctors, vets, stores, community events, and a more balanced life. They are not living on the property yet, and don't know if they ever will. But for now, it's a passion project in the works. The couple has also clarified that their Mexico house project is on pause, not abandoned. All the behind-the-scenes work continues, including architecture, engineered plans, soil tests, and permitting, but they paused physically building because their senior dog Bella needed urgent surgery and long-term specialist care, and Mexico lacks the medical resources required for that, which is what brought them back to Canada for their own peace of mind. The Vanwives do plan on going back to Mexico, but for now, they don't know when that might happen. The most important shift, however, has been their clear prioritization of safety, privacy, and family. The influencers have made it clear that wherever they choose to settle, they will ensure that their home is built with all necessary precautions in place, with a healthy separation between their online and private life. And you can't blame them for wanting that after this roller coaster of a ride. In the end, Jazmyn and Crystal never set out to become symbols of the van life movement, off-grid building, or online resilience. They were just two women who loved the outdoors, loved each other, and wanted a life that felt real. But the very authenticity that made the Vanwives so beloved is what eventually pushed them to rebuild their lives yet again. If Jazmyn and Crystal's story has proven one thing, it's that you can always turn uncertainty into adventure. What do you think about their complicated journey from van lifers to full-blown construction influencers? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.